Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to continue hearing evidence from those who were directly affected by the fire and the arrangements made following it. Yes, Mr. Miller.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, good morning. Good morning, members of the panel. Before I call our next witness, I just wanted to say something about yesterday's thematic summary. During the course of reading it, an inadvertent error was made in relation to Ahmed Al-Ghwari. It was said that he lost his mother, Mariam Al-Ghwari, and his sister, Esla Al-Ghwari. In fact, it was the other way round. He lost his sister, Mariam Al-Ghwari, and his mother, Esla Al-Ghwari. And we apologise unreservedly for that mistake. So
thank you very much.
I hope that's now corrected for the record.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I now call, please, Mr. Hisam Choucair?
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Choucair.
Good morning, sir.
You're going to take the oath, I understand?
Yes, that's correct.
Next to you, you'll find a copy of the Quran, and the words are on the screen. So would you read them out, please?
I swear by Allah that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Do sit down and make yourself comfortable. All right? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Choucair, good morning.
Good morning.
Can I start by thanking you very much for coming to the inquiry and helping us with our investigations? We're extremely grateful to you. If during the course of my examination you'd like me to repeat a question or put the question in a different way, I can do that. We will take the normal mid-morning break at about 11:15, 11:20 or so, depending on how we get on. But if you need a break before that or in the session after that, then let us know and we can take a break. Can I also ask you, please, to keep your voice up so that the person who sits to your right can get down everything you're saying on the transcript clearly. Also, don't nod or shake your head. You have to say yes or no, as the case may be, so that it appears on the transcript. Now, you've made a number of statements to the inquiry. I'm just going to show them to you. The first is IWS 401197. Can we please have that on the screen? And I should just say, Mr. Choucair, that everything I'm going to show you will appear on the screen in front of you. Now, that's the first page of your statement, and you can see that it's dated, you can see that it's dated the 28th of November, 2018. The second, which we'll have up, is at IWS 401851. Sorry, that's the third statement. That's dated the 26th of February 2020. There's a second statement dated the 19th of December 2018, but this one, I think, supersedes it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. And then I know that you made a fourth statement recently, and that hasn't been disclosed yet to call participants because it doesn't cover Module 4 matters, but other matters, but it will be disclosed in due course. So we will be looking at that perhaps another time. Can I take you to your signature pages, please, on your first witness statement, please, page 14. That's IWS 401197. And you can see at the very bottom of the page a signature with the date 28th of November 2018. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Yes. Is that your signature?
Yes, it is.
And if we go to your third statement, which is IWS 401851, and go to page 31 in that, please, you can see a signature there under the statement of truth. Is that your signature?
Yes, it is.
And have you read both of these statements recently?
Yes, I have.
And can you confirm for the inquiry that the contents are true?
Yes,
Thank
to
you.
the best of my knowledge.
Yes. Now, I'd like to ask you some questions first, if I can, about your background or background to your evidence. I think it's right, isn't it? And tell me if this is wrong, but you had a strong connection to Grenfell Tower because a number of your family members lived there.
That's correct.
Yeah. And just go along with me here, just to correct me if I'm wrong about this, but your sister Nadia and her husband Bassem moved into flat 193 in March 2006. Is that right?
I don't know the exact specific dates, but Nadia was the first person to move into Grenfell Tower prior to my mum, but I don't know the exact specific date. It does sound correct.
And your sister and Bassem had 3 children who were your nieces, Miona, Fatima and Zainab.
That's correct.
Yes. And the date we have is March 2013 for when your mother, Syria, moved into flat 191.
That's correct.
And she lived there, I think, with your other sister, Sorson.
That's correct.
Yes. And please correct me if I get any of the pronunciations wrong, but it's Southsand, isn't it?
Southsand.
Southsand.
That's correct.
Southsand. And I think it's right that you would visit your family regularly in the tower.
That's correct.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to turn to the events of June 2017, 14th of June, after you arrived at the scene. And I'm going to use your first witness statement to try to keep as closely as possible to the chronological order in which events happened as the night progressed. Now, you tell us in your statement at paragraph 45, so let's have that up on the screen to help the witness, please. First witness statement, paragraph 45, page 11. You say there that you heard your phone ringing at about 2:48 a.m. Did you note the time? It's very precise.
I think it was actually roughly about 2:45.
Right.
Around that time.
Right. And you say, I remember thinking, who would ring me at this time? I'm actually surprised that I woke up at all, as I'm quite a heavy sleeper. On answering my phone, my brother Nabil said to me, Hisam, put on the TV. Grenfell Tower is on fire. I'm heading down there now. So was that the first time you heard about the fire?
That's correct.
And then you and your wife and your children made your way down to the tower?
That's correct.
Yes. And I think you also say that in the next paragraph that from the moment that you left your flat, you tried to call your sister Nadia and your mother Syria and Bassem a number of times.
That's correct.
And that it rang and you couldn't get a response. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then you go on to say that you arrived, this is page 12, if we go to paragraph 47, you say about halfway down that paragraph, you arrived at the scene at 3 a.m. That's right, is it?
Yes, that's correct. I recall this because I looked at my phone, and that's how I was able to pinpoint that time.
And how would you describe the scene when you arrived?
In order to describe the scene, I would have to describe it from leaving from my home. I could hear a helicopter in the sky. I couldn't see it. I was living in St. Charles Square at that time, and I couldn't see it in the sky. There was hardly no one on the streets. It was a hot, humid day. I ran down Labrador Grove, and the sound of the helicopter was getting louder and louder, but I could still not see it. It seemed like as if the sound of the helicopter was coming from one particular place, but wasn't where I was running down on the streets. It wasn't visible. I could hear sirens of ambulances and police cars and fire engines, but they weren't to be seen on the main road, but you could hear them from a distance. As I came closer to the tower, the sound got louder and louder. When I got to Bramley Road, it was quite chaotic. It was really loud. There were a lot of ambulances parked up, but with no one in them. The doors were all shut. There was a lot of people in the streets. people were shocked, traumatized, crying. It was chaos. There was police there, and if I'm correct, there was a cordon that they had taped off, and it was just chaos, basically.
Do you remember whether there were any officials there, other than emergency services, directing people to where they should go or how they should go about getting information?
No, there were no officials, nobody from the TMO, nobody from the government, no one from the council. There was nobody there. It was just the community, residents, and bereaved and survivors.
Now, if you are shown, please,
And the
page
police.
13. In these two paragraphs, 52 and 53, you describe how you asked for permission from two police officers to be let through the cordon so that you could search rescue centres, but were not allowed. Is that right?
That's correct. When I got to the cordon, the police were really loud, telling us to get back, like as if we were there to riot. They were shouting with an aggressive toned voice, and they clearly were not allowing anyone through. I had my children with me. My children were scared from the sounds that was going on, caused them to cry, because obviously I had seen the tower on fire and the children were with me, and they saw that as well. So they were exposed to that trauma. I didn't see anyone of high-ranking authority from a police officer on that first cordon, and I requested to the police officer, due to knowing the urgency of having to get through, to speak to the person in charge, whether that may be the sergeant or the inspector. And one of the police officers had to leave his point and go to another police officer. I don't know if he went to a sergeant who then went to the inspector, who I know is Nick Thatcher.
Did any of the officers you spoke to provide you with any information to people in your position who weren't in the tower but were looking for loved ones who might be in the tower, and give you any help on that score?
But no police officers on the cordon, despite myself explaining to them that we had family members on the 22nd floor who were obviously disabled and had medical health issues and mobility issues. None of them helped us to say, for example, I will pass this message on, which is the reason why I demanded to speak to the person in charge of the scene, because I had an advance picture of the tower by looking at the TV. So I saw the tower from all angles, and I clearly saw that the London Fire Brigade didn't have the tower under control, in terms of I could see that they had lost control over the tower, which is why it was a matter of urgency for me to go through that cordon. Eventually, the police officer let me through the cordon, if I'm correct, and I was still on Bramley Road, and I think that's where I met Nick Thatcher, and I explained to him again that we have family members in the 22nd floor the likelihood they would be in flat number 193. I told them who would be in the flat. I gave him their names, the contact numbers, their dates of birth, and explained to them that my mum and my sister specifically and her daughter had disabilities and illnesses which would prevent them, or they would struggle to get out of the tower. And I explained to him that we were aware that rescue centres were opening up and we needed to get through the cordons in order to search those rescue centres, and where the cordons were made it really difficult for us to get through in order to search for their cordons, in order to search for our loved ones.
Just help me then on this. So, who told you, or where did you get the information from that rescue centres were opening up? Where did you get that from?
I don't know where I heard that from. I think it was just from the people on the streets.
Right.
Because there were so many people there and we were all sort of in the same position. So I think people were liaising with one another, and it just came from word of mouth that there were rescue centres or possibilities of places that needed to be searched that we heard of through the community or residents. And the police cordon was strangling us in and making it difficult for us to search for those rescue centres. And they were shutting off other streets as the day went by, and the area just felt choked.
Was there so far as you could tell in that chaos, was there a system in place, or the beginnings at least of a system in place at the cordon whereby the police could let you through to get to the rescue centres which were within the cordon?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, was there a system in place for deciding who should be let through the cordon to get to the rescue centres within the cordon?
No, there was no system in place. Otherwise, the officer, despite me explaining to him that we were family members and our family lived in the tower, they would have let us through otherwise, if there was a system.
Now, in paragraph 55, you say, after you've gone through the cordon, you say, I remember searching a pub restaurant called the Garden Bar and Grill on Bramley Road because I was told that survivors and casualties were in there. Now, just to be clear for those listening, the Garden Bar and Grill on Bramley Road, was that within the cordon?
The Garden Bar and Grill, I remember there being a cordon on Bramley Road where the co-op is, just where the station was. There was a tape. It was taped to the lamppost, and then there was I think another cordon within about 10 or 15 metres after that. So just after the walkways, there was another cordon there. So there was a big gap between the first cordon and the second cordon, if I recall.
Right. Do you remember who told you that survivors and casualties were at the Garden Bar and Grill?
It would have been by word of mouth from either the community or the bereaved or survivors. I don't remember who, but that's where I would have got that information.
And you say there was an ambulance crew in there. If you look at paragraph 55, you can see you say there was an ambulance crew in there and they were treating about 4 people for smoke inhalation.
That's correct. The way I got to this garden bar and grill was, I think, when I had the conversation with Nick Thatcher, after him saying that he would pass the information of our loved ones to the relevant people, there was a light on inside the garden bar and grill bar, and I could see that people were in there. I didn't know that this was a rescue centre, but I thought it would be strange for a bar to be open at this sort of time. And I tried to look from the windows from the outside, but the windows were sort of like covered in terms of they had that look like as if you couldn't see through them, if you know what I mean. So I then just went inside. Nothing was stopping me, and there was about 3 people there. One of them was Nicholas Burton, who I recall, and he was seated on a wheelchair. Not a wheelchair, sorry. One of these chairs that the ambulance crew use when they're helping someone who can't stand up. And he had a blanket wrapped around him, and he had an oxygen mask, and his face was, it had like, it was like, there was like soot on his face. It was like smoke. It was all like black. But I recognized him because of his curly hair. And I don't recall who the other 2 people were, but they were clearly traumatized. They were wrapped in like a blanket and shaking. And they also had an oxygen mask over their nose and mouth. And there were a couple of ambulance crew members inside that garden bar and grill. And I had to look these people in the face. I didn't know them by name, but that was quite traumatizing for me. But I had to do it, and I had to see whether they were my family or not. And unfortunately, our family were not there. I remember as I was just about to leave, I asked the ambulance crew whether they had taken anybody or had anybody from the 22nd floor by our family's surname or from the 22nd floor come out of the building, of which they said to me no. I believe it was at this point that I received the list of the rescue centres. As I came out of the garden bar and grill, because I was past the cordon, I saw a passing by police officer, and I asked him if someone was to report their family members missing, where would they go? And he directed me to Whitchurch Road, where I saw a number of fire engines parked up on that road, and there were 3 command units to the right-hand side of the road. And I went into the second one, and it was like one of these like porter cabins, and there was a fire brigade officer there at the desk right in front of me. and he wasn't in uniform, he just had like a T-shirt on. And to the right of him, there was another fire brigade officer who was busy taking calls in the corner. And I explained to him who I was, and I told him that our family are in flat 193. I gave him a list of all our family's names. I told him of their disabilities. I gave him contact numbers, their dates of birth, and he jotted it down on, I think, a yellow piece of paper or a sticky note, and he said that he would pass this information on. And I was there for about 5 to 10 minutes. As I was just about to leave, another ranking officer who was in civil uniform came through as I was speaking to the London Fire Brigade official, and he said to me, or he said to the gentleman at the desk, "I'm here to book in. Where do you want me?" And the fire brigade officer at the desk said, "Can you go and see the watch manager?" When he made these comments, I turned my head towards him because it just caught my attention, what he was saying. And I noticed that he was in civil uniform and he had, I think, 2 studs and a flower on his epaulette. He was quite tall. He had grey hair, medium build. I looked at him and then I walked straight out. And that's when I went back to Bramley Road, I believe.
And did you get any information in the command unit about where you could go to get any further information about
No.
the family? Now, you mentioned a moment ago the list that you'd got from the Garden Bar and Grill. Can we go, please, to page 18 of your third witness statement? That's IWS 401851, page 18. And you can see paragraph 102, you say, "Someone at the Garden Bar and Grill handed me an A4 piece of paper on which there were the names of 6 venues typed in a list. Once I had established that none of the people at the Garden Bar and Grill were my family members, I went to search the other rescue centres. My recollection of the list I was given at that stage was the following," and then they're set out at the bottom of page 18 and over to page 19. You've got number 1, the Latimer Christian Centre, number 2, the Rugby Portobello Club, number 3, the Westway Sports Centre, number 4, a Salvation Army building, and then over the page 5, St Helens Church, the Methodist Church, and 6, Acton Mosque. Now, do you remember who gave you that list? Was it someone from the ambulance crew or someone from the Garden Bar and Grill?
I think it was the ambulance crew member. It was given to me on a white A4 paper in that direct order.
Right.
And there were only 6, and the rest of the page was blank.
Right. And that would have been about what time, given that you'd arrived at the tower at about 3 a.m.? This would have been how long afterwards, roughly? Can you remember? I know it's difficult.
I would say I can't pinpoint a specific time. However, I can condense it down. It would have been any time between the hours of between 3 and 6:30. The reason why I know this is because I arrived at Paddington Hospital at 7:30.
Yes.
So it would have been between those hours.
Paddington Hospital, so St Mary's.
That's correct.
Yeah. And we'll come to that. Was the A4 type list pre-prepared? And did they gave you one of a pre-prepared list, a copy?
I didn't see if they had like a whole bunch.
Right.
It was just given to me by hand, and
Okay.
naturally I accepted it.
Now, look, from your list that you've put in your statement, which we've looked at together, the list of venues didn't include addresses. Is that right?
That's
Just names?
correct, yes.
Right. Were you familiar with these places?
No, the only one I was familiar with is the Salvation Army. And the reason why I was familiar with that is because I used to live in Colville Square, and this rescue centre was on the Portobello Road, of which I used to go through quite often. It was just around the corner from my flat. So that was the only one that I was familiar with.
And you say in paragraph 103, just below that, that in the second line, I recall stopping people on the street and asking them if they knew where these rescue centres were. And you go on to say, by that stage you had about 2% battery left, which you'd saved to call Nabil and your sister for updates. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes. Now, at that point, and I know it's difficult to pinpoint the time in the night, but did you see anybody from RBKC or the TMO or any other official from any official organisation, on the streets directing people where to go to find information about their loved ones?
When I went into the Salvation Army?
Yes.
No, when I went into the Salvation Army Rescue Centre, there was nobody inside there. I recall tables were set up and they had these like flasks with like tea and coffee and biscuits put there, which I clearly wasn't interested in due to fasting, and my main focus was to find our family. There was nobody in that building at all.
And was there anybody on the street from
No.
TMO or RBKC?
No, there was nobody wearing high-vis. There was nobody from the council. There was no police there. No council officials. No one from government. No one that stood out to say, I am an official on behalf of an authority to help us in any way, shape or form. There were no, I didn't see any forms there, no information. It was just tables set up with food on them and coffee and tea.
And I think you tell us in the next paragraph, 104, that your sister Sasan and your wife Kona had searched the church. Is that the Methodist church? There was
When I got to the cordon, obviously because I had my children with me, it was difficult to search the remaining centres because some were on the side that I was on and some were on the side that my sister was on. My sister, when she got to the scene, she came from Shepherd's Bush, so she came from the back side of Bramley Road, and
so that's the south side.
the side as if you're coming from from Shepherd's Bush.
Yes.
Through Holland Park Avenue. She would have come in through that way.
Yeah.
So when I got past the cordon, I left my children, if I recall, with a friend of ours, a very close friend of ours, who's also called Sausan.
Right.
And that's how I was able to search these rescue centres. And having checked on my phone the addresses of these places, Kona, my wife, she went, I think she went with actually Sausan actually, or Sausan took her, Kona, to meet my sister, and then came back to take my children, to look after my children, if I'm correct.
Okay.
They searched, I think, if I'm correct, St. Clement's Church and the Methodist Church. I recall them bumping into Helen, because this was said to me at that time, who was in an ambulance on Bramley Road, further down. And Helen was quite shook up and traumatized because she had lost. And I think they asked Helen if they had seen our family, and they moved on with a friend of theirs to search the rescue centres on the other side and churches, of which we were not able to search. The Methodist Church, St. Clement's Centre, and I don't know what else they did, but I did receive a call, or when I did try to call my sister, I found out that my wife had collapsed in, I believe, the St. Clement's Church. I was quite concerned about that. And I recall my sister speaking with a London Fire Brigade officer, asking them if anybody from the 22nd floor had come out or had they survived. And they were in tears. I was quite concerned that my partner had collapsed, but I knew she was in good hands with the paramedics and my sister.
Now, I think you tell us that the first centre you visited yourself was the Latimer Christian Centre. And you tell us that in your statement at paragraph 105F. We can just scroll down page 19 to see that. Do you remember roughly, and I know, as I say, it's difficult, but do you remember roughly what time you got to the Latimer Christian Centre?
I can't pinpoint a specific time, but I can give like a range.
Yeah.
And that would have been after I had come back through the cordon, so after the garden bar and grill. So it would have been any time between 3 and from the moment I got there to roughly about 7, between those hours.
Right.
Because obviously I wouldn't have known where this place was until I had got the list from the ambulance crew member from the Garden Bar and Grill.
And you
That's how I am able to pinpoint that time.
Yeah, and you say you were able to charge your phone there for a couple of minutes.
That's correct. I couldn't believe my luck. I had actually charged my phone the night before, but it seems like the wire didn't connect with the phone. So by the time I got the phone call, my phone was making that funny noise, like as if it was dying of battery. However, I still took my charger with me and my phone. And when I went inside the Latimer Christian Centre, it was empty. There was nobody upstairs. There was only, again, one person who was setting up tables. I think he was putting like food, like bottles of water and food on the table. But there was nobody in there. And I think on the ground floor or the first floor, I'm not too sure, I saw a socket, and I saw it as an ideal opportunity to charge my phone for a couple of minutes, because I knew it was important. I had to charge my phone in order to be able to make phone calls to liaise with my brother and my sister.
Was anyone on the door at the
No.
at the Christian Centre?
No, there was nobody.
And who was it? From which organisation was it that the person laying out, or people laying out the food and drink on the first floor?
I only saw one person. It was a man. I don't know if he was a community member or whether he worked there. I didn't really ask him. I went upstairs. I saw him laying out the table. He was obviously busy, and I didn't bother him. For me, the moment I realised it was a rescue centre, and if anyone would be in there, they would be upstairs, I went upstairs and the hall was empty, and I immediately, after charging my phone, left the building.
So you didn't speak to the man who was laying out the food and drink and ask him where you might get further information?
No, but there was no information.
Right.
It was like a deserted area, an empty space. There was no information laid out on the tables, and there was no one there besides that man. So I just, after charging my phone, I just left the building.
Were you surprised that there was no, having been told by the LAS through this A4 piece of paper that this was a rescue centre, were you surprised not to see anybody there from the council or the TMO or any other official organisation?
Yes.
Yeah. You then, I think, went to the Westway Sports Centre, and you cover that in paragraph B on page 20 of your statement. If we can just scroll to that. You cover that in some detail in that sub-paragraph there. I'm sorry to ask you all these timing questions, and you may just give me the range again, which is fine, but do you remember what time you arrived at the Westway Centre?
The Westway Sports Centre was the second rescue centre to be searched immediately after the Latimer Christian Centre, due to it being very close.
Yeah.
And it would have been moments after. I can only give you a time between the hours of 3 and 7:30. I can't pinpoint a specific time.
Did you have any, well, let me ask you this way. When you got to the Westway Centre, what did you find?
When I got to the Westway Centre, I ran down there and I went straight to the reception area. I explained to them who I was, and I was looking for my family, and I was a family member, and they directed me to the gym, which was, I believe, outside. The entrance to the gym was outside, so it was sort of around the corner from the entrance of the main entrance to the gym. I ran down there. It was very quiet, to be honest with you. When I got to the gym, I saw family members, not from our family, survivors. There wasn't that many. There was only like a couple of families, but they were spaced out from each other. I think I recall seeing the Jafari family there, and it seemed like as if the space was sectioned into areas. It was split off into people's medical needs. So you had like a triage area, you had like it seemed like as if it was split up, or coded in that sort of way. They had a blanket on top of them, and because they were so spaced out and the gym was quite big, it was massive inside, it was like as if I was playing dodgeball, if you know what I mean, where I'd run to one and then run to another, and then go to another, because they were that spaced out. And however, when I did get to see who they were, even though I don't know them by name, except the Jafari family, I didn't want to get too close because I wanted to respect their privacy as well. And I saw a couple of ambulance crew with them. And once I had clarified that the people inside were not our family members, I immediately left the building because time was of an essence. When I left the building, I recall I just burst into tears because I felt like our hopes of finding our family were being reduced more and more.
Okay, let's take a moment. Do you remember asking any of the ambulance crew or anybody else there for information about how you could get information?
No, I didn't ask the ambulance crew. I didn't want to disturb them from what they were doing, and I also wanted to respect the families that were there.
Do you remember whether, apart from the ambulance crew there, do you remember whether there was anybody in charge of what was going on at the Westway Centre? People on the door, people are filtering who could come in.
There was nobody at the reception of the main area except the member of staff, a couple of members of staff. There was no one from the council there. There was no government officials there. There was no police there at that time. There was no one manning the entrance to the gym from the outside. There was nobody.
Right. When you say staff, you mean Westway staff?
Yes, there was no Westway staff. manning the entrance to the gym from the outside, which was, I think, a back sort of entrance. And the only staff that were there were behind the counter at the reception area, in the main reception area to the gym.
Were they Westway staff?
That's correct,
Yes.
yeah. But there was no one from government, council, police. There was no one by that nature there.
Now, after visiting the Westway Centre, you tell us at the end of B that you then met back up with Nabil as he had parked his car on Crowthorne Road, and we proceeded together to the Rugby Portobello Club. Now, was that a long journey?
It wasn't a long journey from the tower, but the traffic to get there, bearing in mind that we used the back streets, it made it long.
Right. Did you drive?
Yes, to the Rugby Portobello Road Club, yes.
And when you got there, did you have any difficulties entering?
No.
Right.
There was one person in the reception area, and he was in an office, and he didn't even approach me to the window, but there was a sign-in form, and in order to comply with their policy, I signed my name in, and obviously told him who I was. Are there any survivors from Grenfell Tower here? And he said to me, if there would be, they would be in the gym. I immediately went downstairs in the gym, and the gym was empty. So I immediately left the building after signing out.
Now, when you signed in, did you sign in on a normal rugby club
Yes.
form, or was it a special form for the?
No, it seemed like a normal signing in form that was just left in front of the window area of where you would liaise with someone as if you were walking in, and I signed in to comply with their policy and left.
And again, it sounds like, from what you're telling us, but correct me if I'm wrong, that there was nobody at the Rugby Portobello Trust from RBKC or the TMO or any other official organisation.
100% sure there was nobody from them.
And was there anybody there offering any information or support to people in your position searching for loved ones from the tower?
Not at the time that I had visited, no.
Was there later?
I don't think I went back to the Rugby Portobello Road Club, and the reason why I didn't go back was because I believed that I had checked the place and I didn't see no one there, so my intention was to move on. And that's the reason why I didn't go back.
Now, this is I think the third centre that you had visited, leaving aside the two churches that your wife and sister had searched. If you can, how are you feeling at this point?
Having searched these rescue centres, it wasn't looking good.
And I think after the rugby club, you went to the Salvation Army on foot, and you covered that on the next page, page 21, at the top of your screen under letter D there. You say, I eventually found the Salvation Army building at 205 Portobello Road. You say, I eventually found it? Did you have to look for it, or did it just take you a long time to get there?
It's not that I had an idea of where it was, but it was dark, and the lights weren't very good, the lighting in the streets. And due to being traumatized and shocked, although I knew where it was. I couldn't pinpoint where it was, but I knew, I had an idea. It was on Portobello Road. Where exactly on Portobello Road, I didn't know. So I had to ask commuters, despite me knowing the address. I guess you could say I was overwhelmed at that point.
It's helpful to know that it was still dark, but that's your recollection, is it?
It was dark.
So this is the fourth centre you looked for, but it was still dark.
It was in the early hours.
Yes, that's helpful.
Yes.
Now you say in the next paragraph that in that paragraph that you found it empty, and then you rang Nabil to tell him. Was there anybody? You say it was empty, but was there anybody there manning it, providing information, directing operations?
Again, when I went into this building, there was somebody there, but not an official from the council, nobody from government, nobody from the TMO, no police. It was just a staff member there setting up tables, and I recall, like I said, there was coffee on the table, these flasks for people to use if they needed, and biscuits, etc.
And
there was no information laid out on the table for someone to access, and the hall was empty.
Right.
So I left the Salvation Army on Portobello Road, and I think I then met my brother back on Labrador Grove, somewhere underneath the bridge, if I'm correct. And that's when we proceeded to the next rescue centre.
Right. And I think the next thing that happened is that Nabil contacted a friend of yours who lived in the Acton area to find out which mosque was the Acton mosque on the list you had been given at the Garden Bar and Grill. Is that right?
I remember speaking to my brother in the car, and I said to him, can you believe this? They've put Acton Mosque as a rescue centre. How many mosques are in the Acton area? Little did I know that the mosque itself was called Acton Mosque, which I had no idea. But that was my first impression. And due to it being quite far out, a very good friend of ours, who is a friend to my brother and myself, who I also went to school with, lived in that area and was familiar with this mosque. And he searched the mosque, and he got back to us within, I think, about an hour or two from him being informed, to tell us that there was nobody in the mosque, like our loved ones were not there. So we were able to rule out that rescue centre without having to visit it.
Now, by that point, I think, is that right? Every centre on the list that you've been given had been checked by you or your friends and family, and your loved ones have not been found.
That's correct.
And if you look at paragraph 108, you say, what made it worse, as the daylight arrived, is that we learned of other places that were opening up as rescue centres, and it became almost impossible and uncontrollable to monitor anything I also found out that private hospitals were opening up their spaces, which did not help to narrow our search. I know that it was done with a good intention, but there was a lack of centralisation and control, and it was very difficult to find people. Now, one gets the sense from that paragraph, but is this right, that the responsibility was on your shoulders, your personal shoulders, and that of your brother and sister to find your family?
That's correct. It didn't help when we were hearing that other rescue centres and private hospitals were opening up. It made life more difficult for us. It caused stress on us. And it didn't feel like as if we were in control of our situation.
Did you have an expectation at the time, leaving aside events that have happened since then, but at that moment, did you have a thought about who should be running things, who should be in control, monitoring what was going on?
Yes.
Who was that?
I would expect someone from government or the council to have some sort of system in place, to some sort of put order, if you know what I mean. There should have been, I was expecting some sort of order in place in order to assist us, to take that burden from us, to ease the process of us looking for our loved ones. And the reason why I'm expectant of this is because I've worked for Transport for London for many years, and we've dealt with many major incidents, fatalities, and this is something that is naturally, there's a process in place should an event like this, not like this, happen, but we've liaised with emergency services, with the police, with the Home Office, with the ambulance, with the NHS. This isn't nothing new to me. So I was expectant of something like a process, a system in place to be there, but it wasn't. And I was ashamed. But I didn't have time to take that up further at that time of moment.
Now, after you'd visited various rest centres, I think you then started a process of visiting a number of hospitals. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes. And I think you and Nabil made a list of all the hospitals you could think of in the Kensington and Chelsea area and in central London. And I think you numbered about 20 different A&E departments on your list. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, I think the first hospital you visited was in Paddington, the St Mary's Hospital, and you tell us in this statement, if we go over the page, please, to paragraph 111, at about 7:30 a.m. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. Now, do you remember when you arrived at St Mary's, was there anybody there from the council, from perhaps the TMO, from government, or indeed the emergency services to provide you with information?
So when we got to the A&E in Paddington, which I believe was on South Wharf Road, if I'm correct, my main intention was to go through the new building but I think the A&E was closed due to refurbishment, and I think there was a security guard at the reception area, and I went to the first floor, if I'm correct. The A&E was on the first floor. And when I got to the first floor, the doors were locked. It was like as if there was no access to the public from where the lift area was. So I think I asked a member of staff, if I'm correct, and they said to me, they directed me to the Patterson ward or wing, and that's when I left the main entrance to A&E through the main hospital, because usually when we went to A&E in Paddington, we would go up like a ramp, like a curved sort of ramp area in order to get to the main, but obviously due to the hospital being refurbished, when I knew that was closed, I went into the main hospital, and then I went to the first floor, and when I spoke to a member of staff, that's when they told me that no, I had to go to the Patterson ward. That's where people from Grenfell were coming in. So I immediately left the A&E hospital, came out of the hospital. My brother was parked up in the car, and I informed him that the A&E department was closed, and they're taking people in the Patterson wing, which was further down the road. And he said, yes, okay. And he was busy making phone calls. And I immediately went into the Patterson Wing Hospital.
And I think, was it there that you were asked by a nurse to fill in a form with your name, address, contact number, and the details of your family?
Yeah, so I came in to the Patterson Wing. Couldn't see no one in the seating area. I think I must have been one of the first ones. And there was a male nurse seated behind the desk, and I explained to him who I was and whether anyone from our family had come into this hospital, or any survivors. And they made me fill in a form. It asked for who I was, contact number. It asks for details about the person who we were inquiring about. I had to provide their names, the address, contact numbers, and dates of birth, which I struggled a bit with my nieces. And I had to go back to the car, rush back to the car. My children were with my brother in the car. And I had to tell them, we need this information in order to give to the hospital. I think my brother contacted his wife, and eventually we gave them that information at the reception area. And once I gave them that information, I was told to take a seat and wait. There was, again, nobody from the council, nobody from government. There were no police there. And the reception area was deserted. I was the only one there. Moments later, I think about 10 to 15 minutes later, other family members came through, and they were clearly traumatized and shaken. And when they were liaising with the nurse in the reception, they were struggling, and other family members had to speak on their behalf because they were quite shaken up and traumatized.
And you say you were you were waiting. What were you waiting for?
Further information.
From the hospital?
That's correct. It was, I think I was after about 40 to 45 minutes, I don't know. I became frustrated, and I demanded answers, and I went back to the reception area after having comforted and liaised with other family members. I felt this wasn't acceptable. So we received information that people from Grenfell Tower had been brought into the hospital, but they didn't know that the hospital were not able to identify them. So some were unconscious or in a coma, or I don't know. And I said to them, why don't you search their pockets? You know, people would come out of that tower, the first thing they're going to do is probably take ID or passports or driving licenses. They're not going to come out empty. Some will come out empty, but it was an instinct of me to inform them, search their pockets. And it was like talking to a brick wall. They didn't really want to take into consideration what I was trying to say to them. And I even said to them, I can give you the number of the TMO. They will be able to tell you who is in the building, because I was a tenant management. My landlord was the TMO as well when I was living in St. Charles Square. And they were based, the hub was based on the Kinsale Road. So there was a number for them to ring, which I offered to them, which I'm sure as well, when you ring that number, you could speak to someone even in late hours, because I knew this, because you could even report an emergency, which I have done, a repair in early hours of the morning. So I offered this to the male nurse, and they just weren't really interested.
Did you get the sense that they understood that the longer they didn't give you information, the longer you would have to sit there, and therefore that would hold up your search of other hospitals?
They clearly weren't interested in, no matter how long we had sit there, they just treated us like as if we were normal people walking into an A&E department waiting to find out information for our loved ones. There was a lack of urgency. One thing they did help me with is they provided me with a charger, which I was able to charge my phone and use their facility in the waiting area. And I remember kicking up a fuss in the A&E department, and I demanded to speak to the accident and emergency doctor, because there was a lack of information and update, having waited the time that we had waited, and I didn't find that acceptable under the circumstances. and an accident and emergency doctor, a female, I don't know her name, who I praise, as other families were coming through, took it upon herself to go back in and out of the A&E department and to obtain information regarding people that they had identified, and they started to this doctor she started to take down a description of the people who were in the waiting area, anxiously waiting and shaken and traumatized, of who their loved ones were. And she would go back into the A&E department and then come back to the reception area and say, no, we don't have this person, or no, I'll look for this person if you can give me an idea of what your loved ones look like. So she was doing her very best, because I think the A&E was on the first floor, like I said, due to it being closed. So she clearly had a distance to travel. It wasn't like next door beyond the doors of the reception area, due to where the Patterson wing was. And she was doing her best to liaise with families that had joined myself whilst waiting in that area. Now, I don't know if this was whilst I was in the waiting area, the news, the TV was on, and I think it was GMTV, and they were talking about Grenfell, and it was at this point that the police casualty bureau number came out, and it was on a bar on the bottom of the screen, a long number, I don't know how many digits, and it was clearly said on TV that this would be the number to ring if people wanted information about their loved ones. And I believed it opened at 8:30. So because I was there during that period, it was an ideal opportunity for me. Also taking into consideration, I intentionally charged my phone in order to make that call. I rang it at 8:30 on the dot. And it just rang and rang and rang. I then tried again, and I got a message, an automated message, which said there are no callers available to take your call. And I just felt, how can the police advertise a number on TV related to our loved ones for us to ring, and come the time of when it should be open for someone to take the call, there was nobody to take the call. And to get that response that there were no call handlers available to take your call was shocking. It was like, this is the last thing I need. And and then I just rang it again, and it was still constantly ringing, and nobody answered. I didn't have time for this. So I stored the number in my phone, And I left the Patterson wing or ward having, I believe, achieved what needed to be achieved there and went back to the car.
And at that point, had you had information from the hospital that your loved ones were not there, your family wasn't there?
No.
So you did.
I didn't, because they were still finding it difficult to identify people that they had brought in. I didn't get the full. I left knowing that there were people in there that they weren't able to identify, but I felt like as if I was wasting my time remaining there, bearing in mind that there were other hospitals to check. And despite myself liaising with them and telling them what to do, they weren't really interested. I felt like as if I was wasting my time. And time was of a presence and an essence, sorry. And I felt that there were other hospitals to check, and I just needed to keep moving, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Well, we'll come perhaps to the next hospital after the break. I think it's time for the morning break, Mr. Chairman. Mr.
Yes.
Choucair, are you content to take a break now?
Yes, please.
Well, I think we could all benefit from a short break at this point, so we'll stop for the moment. We'll resume, please, at 20 to 12. And I'm going to ask you, as I've asked all the other witnesses, please don't talk about your evidence to anyone while you're out of the room.
Yes.
All right? Thank you very much. Would you go with the usher, please?
Sure.
Thank you very much. 20 to 12, please. Okay. Would you ask Mr. Choucair to come back in, please? All right, Mr. Choucair. Well, I'm sorry we kept you waiting rather longer than I'd said we would, but we are now ready to go on.
Yes.
You ready to go on, I hope?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Choucair, after St Mary's, I think you then went to the A&E department at Hammersmith Hospital. Is that right?
Yes. Before I answer this point or question, could I please touch on the last point before the break?
Yes.
The reason why I left the Patterson wing was because apparently I was told that the people that were there at the time of the moment, they had identified them, who they were. That's the reason why I left.
Yes.
It wasn't. I didn't leave with half information, if you know what I mean.
No, thank you. So then I think you went, as you say in your statement, to Hammersmith.
Yes, we went to Hammersmith Hospital. I believe it was on Duquesne Road, if I'm correct. I went into as it was in the path back to our house. I believe it was at that point that my children were dropped off at my home address, and my partner met with my brother's wife and her children, who also joined our family, and myself and my brother proceeded to Hammersmith Hospital on Duquesne Road, the accident and emergency department.
And you say, if we go please to your statement, your third statement, page page 23, paragraph 121. If we can go to that. That's IWS 401851, please. Page 23, paragraph 121. You say at the foot of the screen there that you went to the Hammersmith Hospital and gave your name, and they said, third line, they said they would not tell me if anyone was there. I asked if they had any patients who'd come in from the Grenfell Tower fire. They said, no, sorry. It was pretty quick to check this hospital because they do not have a proper A&E department. It's more like a minor injuries A&E, and they knew they didn't have anyone from Grenfell. I therefore crossed this hospital off my list. And I think you then went to Charing Cross Hospital after that, as you say in the next paragraph.
That's correct.
And there, as you say, you were told that they couldn't tell you whether anybody from Grenfell Tower was there due to data protection laws. Is that right?
That's correct.
What did you think about that?
I think silence tells you the answer. I was very angry. I even reworded. I felt like as if I had to play with my words of speech in order to get the answer it demanded.
Yes, you said.
And I had to rephrase the question. So I tried it from all angles. But I couldn't believe, despite the urgency of the situation, that I would get a response like that. I felt like as if I was being obstructed, and empathy, humanity, lack of consideration wasn't taken into, and I was shocked, but I also responded to that shock by having to try and reword my phrase to get the answer I required in order to move along to the next hospital.
And I think in the end you got an answer, and that was that your family wasn't there.
Yes, despite being there for quite a while, you could say I got an answer by the scruff of the neck, as they say.
And at this point, had you become, apart from the Casualty Bureau line, had you become aware of any official services or support that you could access as somebody looking for their loved ones?
No. The only information that was made aware to me was the Casualty Bureau number, and that was just to find out information about our loved ones. And I attempted, like I said, to ring that number. I did ring that number numerous times. 8:30 on the dot. I intentionally waited for that specific time whilst my phone was charging. And like I said, it rang and rang first time. I attempted to ring it again, and that's when I got the automated response to say there were no call handlers on the line to take the call. And I tried again, and it just rang and rang, and that's when I gave up hope at that point in contacting that number.
Did you ring it again during the course of the rest of the 14th of June?
Yes, I did.
You did. And what happened then? What?
I got through to them. I believe it was at the point when we had reached Cromwell Road Hospital, and I was in the car, and just as I was getting out of my brother's car, did I get through to them, and I was giving them the information of our loved ones, their names, their addresses, their dates of birth, contact numbers, any unusual marks on them to identify them. This also prevented me from actually going into the hospital at that point, because I was on the phone for about 25 minutes, and they gave me serial numbers, reference numbers for each loved one, which I noted down on the piece of paper that I had with me. And I had all the information to give to them. At no point did they say to me, someone will be in contact with you, this is what will happen next. It was more sort of me answering their questions. And that was it.
Did they tell you what they would do with the information you'd given them?
No.
Or what you should do with the reference numbers that they'd given you?
No. I did get some sort of idea, this is from my common sense, that having heard the questions that they were asking me and reflecting on them, I came to the sense of it felt like as if it was a data input system and not really a system that was there to provide information about our loved ones. It was more sort of a system that we were feeding into. That's what that's the, what's the word? I got that sense from the questions that I was being asked, and it was more, the questions were very direct. There was a lack of information, there was no information about what would have happened next, so I immediately knew that I was feeding into some sort of system to gather information about our loved ones.
Did that at least give you some kind of assurance that at least somebody in authority knew who you were and that you were connected with your family in the tower?
No. And the reason why I say no is because I had already informed the inspector who was in charge of the scene, at the scene, regarding our loved ones. I gave him the relevant information, and furthermore, he passed this information to the London Fire Brigade, and to add to that, I knew I went to the correct place of where the fire brigade, the command unit was that was taking in the rescue, the 999 calls to the fire brigade. I believed that that was sufficient enough. It didn't give me extra reassurance, if you know what I mean. Providing it to the bureau, the police bureau. However, it was more a tick box for me to say that I have complied with the latest information that is out. So it was just a tick box for me. For me, the most important point out of all of this was to give this information to Nick Thatcher, commanding officer, and to the London Fire Brigade at the scene, rather than the police bureau.
Yes, I see. Now, you say that you then visited Chelsea and Westminster, and in your statement at paragraphs 123 to 126, you explain in detail what happened there. And they made you wait, sent you down to the cafeteria to speak to somebody, and you were asked to fill in a form by a staff member. I think in total you waited alongside other families in the cafeteria there for 40 minutes. What were you waiting for?
This was a frustrating experience for me when I went to Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. I had the same challenges with regards to data protection, that the staff were not able to provide me with a direct answer as to whether our loved ones were in the hospital. They used the same excuses, or they used the same response to Charing Cross. Having kicked up a fuss, having received these responses, eventually having pushed them, or should I say challenging them around this, was I directed to the basement, which very rarely I've gone to. And I was told to go to a cafeteria. I came out of the lift. There were no signs. I had to ask members of staff. It was very well hidden. It wasn't like in front of the lifts. And eventually, when I got in there, I recall seeing Kim Taylor-Smith from the council, and Elizabeth Campbell, and there was a person, or should I say a nurse, but I don't know if they were in uniform, at a desk. It was a small cafeteria area, and they asked me, I explained who I was, and I explained to them that I'm looking for our family. They asked me for the same information, and they made me fill in the same form, well, a similar form, should I say, to the Patterson wing in Paddington. And I believe this information was then put onto a laptop because I could see the nurse typing away, and I was just told to wait. Wait for what? I don't know. I certainly wasn't told what to wait for. Due to being in the basement area, there was no reception on my phone, so I wasn't able to liaise with my brother. And then other family members from survivors or bereaved started coming into this cafeteria. And like you said, I was there for about 40 minutes with no update from any medical staff member. There was nobody there from, well, besides Elizabeth Campbell and Kim Taylor-Smith from the council. There's no one there from the TMO. There was no government official there that I was aware of, and I wasn't having it. I became frustrated and I demanded answers, and I felt that the wait was unacceptable, and what we were being put through, everybody that was there, was unacceptable. We were taken, it was like as if we were taken from trauma to trauma. It was like repeated trauma. And it was like punishment, and it was like as if the inside of your gut was being ripped up, and it was that sort of feeling. The lack of communication, the lack of updates, the challenges. So eventually I demanded to speak to the sister in charge of the accident and emergency department. And I didn't realise, but the chief executive of the NHS of Chelsea and Westminster was standing right beside me when I demanded that information. At no point did he make an attempt to try and ease this process of us obtaining that information. The sister or a member of staff then, or they called in the sister of that department, and she then, having heard what I had to say, etc., and I put my challenge to her after kicking up a fuss saying that this is unacceptable, and 1 minute this, next minute that. She then said, let me see what I can do. Whether that was because she was standing in front of the chief executive of that hospital, I don't know, but she certainly did act straight away after hearing what I had to say. Obviously, I didn't realise that the chief executive was standing very close by to me and heard everything that was going on. She then disappeared for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and came back immediately and said, we do not have anybody with the surnames you have provided.
Now, you mentioned in your statement, and you mentioned it again just now, that you saw Elizabeth Campbell and Kim Taylor-Smith from RBKC in the cafeteria. Did you get any sense of what they were doing there? Why they were there?
I didn't even know who they were at that time.
Oh, I see.
So they were talking with each other. They didn't have anyone beside them. It was just her and him. And that's all I know. I don't know what their objective was at that time because I didn't know who they were. But I recall them there, having met them afterwards. I recall their description, and I'm 100% adamant that they were there.
Right. Now, other than them, was there anybody there from RBKC or TMO in an active role, actually doing something?
No.
Right. Now, you, I think, then went, as you say, at paragraph 127, to the Royal Marsden Hospital on the Fulham Road, which is not very far down the road, is it, from Chelsea and Westminster?
That's correct. I believe it's Fulham Road. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And you said that they were very cooperative, very cooperative and helpful. What did they do?
Yes, they were, and it doesn't surprise me that they were helpful. This was the hospital where my mum and Pilly worked at, so I had some sort of insight in. You know, my mum always spoke highly of Pilly and this hospital, so it wasn't of a surprise to me. So basically, I went to a department of everybody that had been admitted into the hospital, and having explained who I was, and I was looking for our loved ones, and I was directed to go to another department. I don't know what the name of that department was, but they brought back with me a printout, a computer printout of every single person that had been admitted into hospital, regardless of whether it was accident and emergency, and of the people that were there on that day. And I had to read through every single name. I can't remember if it was in chronological order, but that gave me the answers that I was looking for, and it took a while, but I looked at each page. I think it had the names and the surnames, if I'm correct, and our loved ones were not on there. So that gave me the answer I needed in order to leave that hospital. There was no further reason for me to remain. They were also cooperative, despite other hospitals who were obstructive and prevented us from accessing information.
Did you wonder why they hadn't given you what you've described as the data protection response to your request for the information?
No, but I was prepared for it. Yeah, I was prepared for it.
I think you then went to the Royal Brompton Hospital, but that being a specialist heart hospital was unlikely, and you discovered there was no one there either.
That's correct. This hospital was, I think, is it Sydney Street?
Yes.
It's just sort of around the corner, really, from it, near the King's Road, because they specialise. They're a heart hospital, or they're well known for being a heart hospital, and they specialise with people with cardiac arrest. And they were able to tell me that at the reception area, if I'm correct, they did not have anybody bar our family's surname there.
Right. And I think you then went back, or decided with Nabil to go to the Cromwell Hospital. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Right. And also discovered that your family wasn't there.
That's correct. But prior to that, it was at this point that I got through to the police bureau number. I saw it as an ideal opportunity to contact the police bureau number, because it was a bit of a travel from Fulham Road all the way back to Cromwell Road. So I saw it as an ideal opportunity to ring back the police bureau number, and I did get through, and I was in the process of speaking to them whilst we were in the car, and that conversation continued until we got to the hospital. I then had to wait another 10 minutes or so outside the hospital because I didn't want to speak inside sensitive information. I found a quiet space outside the hospital. I then walked into the Cromwell Hospital. I knew it was a private hospital, and they were quite cooperative. They gave me the information there and there that I needed. Don't get me wrong, I did want them to tell me that our loved ones were there, but they gave me a straight answer.
And again, no data protection
No.
defence.
No.
So just to be clear, you called, because I think your statement says something slightly different. You called the Police Casualty Bureau before going into the Cromwell Hospital, not after leaving it.
It was as we were returning back from the hospital. At some point on that journey from the hospital on Sydney Street back to the Cromwell Hospital, that I was attempting to ring.
I see.
And I think I got through, if I'm correct. And it was at that point when I was at just before it. Before we got to Cromwell Road Hospital, that I got through, but the conversation carried on to the moment we got to the hospital, and I had to remain outside it, and I found a quiet space.
Right.
It carried on because they asked for a lot of information. There were 6 that we had to provide, and I had to give addresses, date of birth, description, and that took quite a while for each family member. Then we were given reference numbers for each one.
Yep, I see. And then I think after, is this right, after the visit to the Cromwell Hospital, you went back to the Patterson wing at St Mary's, yes?
That's correct.
Yes. What made you go back to St Mary's?
The reason why we went back to St Mary's was because from the moment we left them, at the time we had left them, at the time of mourning that we had left them, it would be clear that more survivors would be coming to the hospital or rescued. And that was a main hospital within the borough. The Paddington and Chelsea and Westminster were the main, really, hospitals within the borough whenever someone has come from an incident or a serious incident. Those were the 2 main hospitals.
And as you say at paragraph 130, if we can just scroll down a little further down page 25 of the statement on your screen, Mr. Choucair, you say there at the beginning of that paragraph, I had to sign in and provide my name and contact details. I was then directed to a police officer who asked me the same questions I'd been asked by the Casualty Bureau, so I had to go through all the same information again. I was distressed by having to repeat everything, and this was a long process. I think one of the police officers then gave me a phone number to call, where I was asked to provide the same information yet again, and this phone call took about 40 minutes. It was not made clear to me at the time whether all of this information would be going to the same place. Now, does this, just counting it, you'd already provided, is this right? You'd already provided your details to St Mary's on the first visit, and now you're asking that you're asked to provide them a second time, and then a third time when you rang the Casualty Bureau. And in fact, it was in fact a fourth time because you'd already given that information to the Casualty Bureau. Have I counted the number of times correctly?
So the first time I got through, well, if you're talking about giving information about our loved ones, the first time would have been to the Commander Nick Thatcher or the Inspector Nick Thatcher. Then from then to the Patterson wing in Paddington. Then the third time, Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. And then the fourth time to the police again.
The Casualty Bureau.
The fourth time the Casualty Bureau. Then the fifth time to the police again, because when I went back to the Patterson wing, I was told that I was told to go to, I think it was the gallery or the conference room, and that was in the Mint wing, which was out of the hospital. So I had to come out of the Patterson wing and then go to the Mint wing in the old hospital. And there was a gallery room. It was, or a conference room. I think it was called the gallery. And I was told to go there. And when I went there, I had to sign in who I was. And I saw other people there. And I had to wait my turn. And there were two officers, two detectives in plainclothes, and they had notebooks, and they were taking down our information. They asked me the same questions of what the police bureau had asked me. And I did tell them that I had provided this information, if I'm correct. However, still cooperated with them because they were in plainclothes, they were detectives. I felt, the need to. And I think, if I'm correct, before seeing them, because there was a queue to see them, I was waiting my turn, if I'm correct, and then they, after having provided the information about our loved ones to the detectives, we then left, or we were told to leave because they needed that room. And that's when I left, if I'm correct.
Right.
And I'm just looking at my statement.
Yes.
Yes. So this detective provided me, again, with a number, which I had no idea that it was. I don't know whether it was the Police Casualty Bureau number. I didn't take it upon myself to check, in honesty. But I took it as if it was like another number I had to feed this information about our loved ones into. Mm. And that's the reason why I rang it and gave them the information. They then again gave me serial numbers for each family member. At no point did they say that you have already contacted us or we have this information, etc.
Right.
It took a lot out of me because I was fasting and it was mentally exhausting.
And having provided that information on a number of occasions, which you've now recounted to us, both to the police and the Casualty Bureau at least once, and at the hospitals. Did you actually receive any information?
I didn't receive no phone call from any hospital or the Police Casualty Bureau. In my recollection, if I go through it again, how many times I had to give this information. So I'll start off with the information was provided to Nick Thatcher. That's one. It was then provided to the Patterson Wing, A&E reception. That's twice. It was then provided to the Police Casualty Bureau number. That's 3 times. It was then provided to the detectives who were in the gallery room in the Mint Wing. That's 4 times. And then having contacted the number that they had given me, so altogether it's 5 times.
Yeah. And then you went back to the A&E reception, I think, where a member of staff showed you a list of names of everyone who'd gone for treatment. And I think you discovered that your family's names wasn't on that list. Yes, that's what you say in paragraph 132 and 133.
I can only see one.
Yes, so if we turn to page 26, I think you can see that. In paragraph 132, you tell us that you went back to the main entrance of the Queen Elizabeth building, and in para 133, went back to the reception, and then you say, I spoke to a staff member who showed me a list of the names of everyone who had gone to A&E for treatment. I checked but could not find our family's names there. They said they had verified people's names, but I'm not sure how they would have done this. I thanked the member of staff and left the building immediately and went to the car. There was no time to waste, as we still had more hospitals to search.
Yes, so I went back into the A&E building in the new building, which I believe was called the Queen Elizabeth building at St. Mary's, and I went to the first floor. I went to the A&E department. I don't know how I got through, whether someone let me in or I knocked on the window, I'm not too sure. And I went to the reception area, and they showed me the book. It was like a A3 size book, and it had all the login entries of everybody that had attended St. Mary's Accident and Emergency on that day. It showed the dates, the time, the names, and I think it had a signature, I'm not too sure. And I looked in that book, and our family members were not listed in that book, and therefore I thanked them, and I left the building, and as I left the building, if I'm correct, there were 2 police officers standing, or they may have been there when I went in, but I had conversation with them as I was leaving or as I was entering, I'm not too sure. And out of curiosity, I took it upon myself to ask them, do they have any information about our family, whether they were here, whether they know anything. And I could tell that they were officers not from the borough due to their epaulets and the letters on their shoulders. Having worked with the police, you get familiar with the letter abbreviations of what police station they were from. And they said to me that they didn't even know why they were there. Right. And they don't know what they're supposed to do. So I was a bit shocked to put 2 police officers on the main hospital that took in a majority of survivors, for them not to know what they were doing, but nothing surprised me.
Now, I think after that, you then went to University College Hospital. Roughly what time of the morning now was that, if it was still morning?
Oh no, it's definitely morning. Right. So, wow, I'm just trying to. So if I obviously contacted the police casualty bureau number at 8:30 in the morning, and then if you look at the amount of hospitals I've had to check, this would have been quite late in the morning. I cannot pinpoint a specific time. I would say probably maybe between 11 and 1.
And then you tell us that you continued your search at University College Hospital, St Thomas's Hospital and King's College Hospital down in Denmark Hill. And your family was at none of those hospitals. And then eventually, as you say in paragraph 137, that you went home between 4 and 5 o'clock on the afternoon of the 14th of June. So just adding it up, is it right that you visited some 11 hospitals, including going back to St Mary's twice, and contacted 2 numbers, the police numbers you were given, and gave your number in face-to-face to the police on at least 2 occasions, but had received no information or updates about your family by the time you went home?
I haven't counted exactly how many hospitals I've visited, but I'll take your word for what you're saying. If it is 11, we definitely didn't get no update from the hospitals, despite leaving our names and numbers. We didn't get no update from the police. Nobody from the TMO or the council called us, despite having our numbers. I remember when I went into St Thomas Hospital, I think this was in County Hall, if I'm correct. I know I shouldn't have done this, but I sneaked into their intensive care unit, because when I came across the intensive care unit, I felt like as if we had missed going to the intensive care units in the other hospitals as well. So I saw it as an ideal opportunity, and I searched the whole ward, and I feel a bit bad, but because I had to open curtains on it was wrong, but I don't know how to explain it. It was the wrong thing to do, but it was also the right thing to do through pressure. And I'm sorry for that. I invaded people's privacy through desperation. And I don't know if I was followed by security, I don't know, but I felt like as if all I can say is I'm sorry to whoever's privacy I did invade, but it was through desperation.
You also say in paragraph 137 that when you got home you ended up breaking your fast.
I actually broke my fast before the time that I was supposed to break it because I just couldn't take it anymore. There was the taste, like myself, my brother, my children, that were exposed to, a plastic sort of taste in our mouth, and it was a horrible taste. The amount of talking that I had to do, my eyes were watery, I was coughing constantly, and I just wasn't able to continue my fast. My throat was really dry, and I felt really guilty, but I couldn't take it no more. Myself and my brother broke our fast. Prior to the time, I think we stopped at a Tesco, and we bought a sandwich and a drink of water. Prior, it was somewhere near, I think it was just after, between the University College Hospital and the hospital on Denmark Hill, the King's College Hospital, somewhere between that.
And would I be right in thinking that because of the circumstances in which you woke up and immediately left your home to go to the tower at about 2:45 to 3 a.m., you hadn't taken the fast either? You hadn't had anything to eat or drink before sun had come?
That's correct. From 2:45, you could say, which I was up, obviously, to the time we got back home, until the time I broke it, before the actual time, yes, I was still fasting.
And just to give people who may not understand the impact or seriousness of breaking your fast before the time, how did you? I mean, to you, was that an important matter?
It is. However, God is merciful and forgiving.
Now, let's turn then to the days after the 14th of June. In paragraph 139 of your statement on page 27, you say there, it's difficult to be clear about the order of events in the days which followed. I think that the onus was mainly on me and Nabil in terms of searching and calling the hospitals. I remember how Nabil and I would go down to the Grenfell Tower very early in the morning. People of all faiths and backgrounds were there, unloading food, water, clothes and accessories into the centres and giving them out on the streets. And you go on to say, I particularly remember this at the Latimer Christian Centre. You can tell people were coming from all over to help. I did not see anyone from the local authority. The community put the government and the local authority to shame. People were still gathered in numbers, traumatised, crying and hugging each other. I could feel the community's pain. The pain I was experiencing was like the inside of me was being ripped up with a knife, and I felt choked. Is that description there something which you would apply to all the days which followed?
Yes.
For the next few days after the 14th of June?
Yes, that's correct. Speaking of shame, it reminded me of the information that I laid back to Chelsea when I was in Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. In terms of the information that I said to the sister, I said to them that St. Mary's Hospital puts your hospital to shame. Sorry to touch on that point, but it just reflected the information or the point that was made here. In the events of when we went back to the scene, I recall it being chaotic in the streets. There were people from all over London bringing in supplies and loading them up on the pavement, water, food, and they were then taken into clothes, shoes. They were taken into the rescue centres, especially the Latimer Christian Centre, and the people from the community were helping them. It wouldn't surprise me if some bereaved family members or survivors were also in that. I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did help. There was nobody there from the local authority that I saw, nobody visible from the TMO, from the council. There was police on the scene. It was something amazing that I had never seen before, and it put the local authority to shame, because it showed that the community were such a tight net that they didn't rely or need the help of the council. They were perfectly capable of getting by with what was going on at the time of the moment, and people were just getting on with it through their generous donations. Obviously, I wasn't aware that people were obviously also scattered, and some people knew where certain stuff was, etc. But with regards to the feeling, that feeling remained with me, and until today still remains with me, of how these crooks are still hiding until today and blaming each other of the events of what occurred on that day.
And you tell us in your statement, paragraph 140, that you chose photographs of your family and put them on sticks and appealed on live television. Did you receive any calls in response about your family, after having put up the images?
No, we got pictures of our loved ones through a WhatsApp. Unfortunately, most of the pictures of our family were in Lebanon. We had like loads of albums of our family all together, of which I obviously don't have access to. And I don't know how, but someone sent us a picture of my mum, my sister and her children. We wanted to try to get my sister and her children all together in one picture, and we managed to do that. And on that morning, I wasn't working at the time. I was on benefits, and we managed to find somebody, a printing shop, to print these pictures and get them laminated. And I had to haggle with the person, which I don't regret, but it was quite difficult for me to do, to be put through that. It lowered my dignity, but it was necessary to haggle with someone on a main high street that owns a business. And we put these on some sticks, and we laminated the rest. And the idea was to hang up these pictures in core areas, like, for example, close to the scene, rescue centres, bus stops, and to also do live television conferences. And we needed something that would reflect our family, that would catch the eye, if you know what I mean. Like, for example, the word missing in red, or, you know, it was like in bold, or something that would catch the eye, because we knew every eye in the situation we were in was precious due to the lack of information. And we printed telephone numbers. Myself and my brother put his telephone number on the bottom, just in case if one didn't get through, we would use my number as well. I didn't receive no phone calls, unfortunately. However, during the space of whilst doing this, one thing which also killed the hopes of our family killed the hopes of them being alive, which I didn't really say to my brother, but I saw two T-shirts of the London Fire Brigade, and they were hanged up on the railings next to where the underground station was, and they had a badge on them, or had LFB on them, and there was messages on them, and I think there were two shirts. One was navy blue and one was white, I think with red on it, the title LFB, and there was a message on it saying, sorry, we didn't, make it to the 22nd floor, or etc. Rest in peace. I don't know. And there was also in the alleyway, I think it is just after the Latimer Christian Centre, there's an alleyway, a wall, where people took comfort in writing on the walls, and somebody, I don't know who, put a white T-shirt of our family all on one shirt and hanged it up on the railing, and there was a Liverpool scarf on it which said, "You'll never walk alone," and it was like, "Rest in peace." And there were messages, and people took comfort in that wall. It was such a particular space that people were writing on the wall and showing their expressions and emotions, and took comfort in it, that they even covered it, and they put candles on the floor, and they were praying there, like, to their loved ones. I don't know if my brother did see that, but I was exposed to that during the search of our loved ones whilst putting up the posters, and it was something you couldn't miss, if you know what I mean. And this is what I mean when I say we were taken from trauma to trauma, repetitive trauma, but the adrenaline of wanting to find our loved ones was the main focus.
And during that first week after the 14th of June, did you have any contact from the council or from the TMO at all about your loved ones?
I didn't get no call from the council. I believe on day 4 or day 5, I'm not too sure, we did get a call from the police, That's when we were introduced to our family liaison officers, who was Heather Rigdon and Ashley, two female officers, and I believe we were told to meet them in Notting Hill Gate Police Station. And when we got there, we were put in a custody interview room, such a small, tight space. Myself, my brother, and my sister, Sausan, were there. And it was claustrophobic, if you know what I mean. There was like about 5 of us in one sort of space, which was only like maybe 2 by 3 meters, or 2 meters by 2 meters. That's how small the space was. It was very claustrophobic and uncomfortable, and we were all sort of squashed next to each other. And I think they asked us questions, and I think they wanted our DNA or something, or they had identified my mum at that time. I'm not too sure. Or they required DNA from us.
Did during the course of that meeting, did you get any information about what had happened to any particular members of your family in the building, or all of them?
No, not at that stage. Not at that stage. I think it was just that they wanted DNA, and they introduced themselves, who they were, if I'm correct. That was our very first meeting, if I'm correct.
Did you get any information at that meeting about what was going on, about where your loved ones might be?
Not at that time, no.
And when did you eventually find out that your loved ones and your family had perished in the fire?
I can't pinpoint an exact time. I think it was, I don't know if it was a couple of weeks later or a couple of months later. We received information. I think my mum was the first person, if I'm correct, to be identified through DNA. Myself and my brother done our first interview, if I'm correct, was with a radio station, or it was a foreign newspaper. I don't know why, but they just happened to be the first one. And then myself and my brother went live on Sky News, and there was many people there, and the police were there in the background, and they wanted to interview us. We saw it as an opportunity to obtain information through our loved ones. We knew that Sky News were quite popular, and that a lot of people would watch Sky News, and we used them, and I'm sure they used us for what they wanted to achieve. There was talk about where to do this interview. They wanted to do it in a particular place. We said to them, no, it gets done in the middle of the tower, in front of the tower, and it was under one condition, that it would go live there and then. It wouldn't be pre-edited. And then we done our interview. We told the public that if anyone has seen our family members with the sticks in our hand and pictures of our loved ones to please contact the Police Casualty Bureau number. And other press started mobbing us because when they saw like a centerpiece, it was like as if they wanted a piece of the action or they wanted to know what was going on. The police that was standing behind us, there was about like 10 or 12 police officers, and they were all spaced out. And after doing this interview, a massive crowd came, I think, from the town hall, and hundreds of people. And the police were standing there. I think they were there to prevent order or prevent public order, and they were sort of, it's like as if they didn't want to be there, like as if they knew that they were standing with us, if you know what I mean, but at the same time it was like as if they didn't want to be there, or they knew something that we didn't know. And this whole crowd came to the scene after myself and my brother done our interview, and people were angry, naturally, the residents, the community, whoever else as well. We were all angry, and but we were also we remained what's the word, respectful at the same time, if you know what I mean. They didn't go past beyond like the police, despite the amount of people that had gathered. Everyone remained respectful and stopped at that point. And again, we continued after that to go to the rescue centres. I then went back to the Westway, if I'm correct. I think we're into the next day. We came back to the scene again. Whilst we were at home, every sort of hour, myself and my brother would ring the accident and emergency casualty numbers to see if our loved ones had been identified. This would be done every hour, but there was no updates. When I went back into the Westway, the Westway, for some reason, I don't know why, but I brought my passport with me, and there were 3 sort of tables outside the Westway, if I'm correct, and there was the British Red Cross were on one table, or the last table, if I'm correct, and there were another 2 tables. One table I had to sign in. Another table, I think, put like a wristband on me, and it was one of those that it wasn't. I don't think it was a rubber. I think it was like a paper sort of tight one that remained on your wrist. Can't remember what colour they were, what colour it was. And another table showed us or told us where to go, etc. And I walked into the centre, and it was chaotic in there. It was like as if it was like the Houses of Parliament, when everyone's all scattered, and when they're having their debates, and the sound was that loud. I wouldn't really call it a rescue centre because it was chaos in there, and I really do feel sorry for the survivors that were made to remain there whilst all this was going on, because their privacy was sort of deprived. They had wooden boards with, I don't know, sort of material roughly about 5 foot high to separate where the survivors were. And the other section had like tables. There were people there from the Home Office. There were people there from the Passport Office. There were the Citizens Advice Bureau were there. And on the other side, there was also a table with food on it. And even on that side, there was no privacy, if you know what I mean. The survivors were exposed to everybody that walked in there. And it was chaotic, and I don't know why I brought my passport with me, but I wrote down the addresses of our loved ones, and that's how I managed to get in.
Which day was that? How many days after the fire was that experience?
I think it was during the first week,
right,
if I'm correct.
And were you aware of any psychosocial or counselling support offered to you or to Nabil or your sister, Sausan, during that first week?
No. I wasn't made aware of any counselling or social support available to me.
Right.
I am aware that there were people were having housing issues, and the North Kensington Law Centre were dealing with a lot of people's cases due to the struggles that they faced within the council, and they weren't happy with where they were at that time. I had no reason to go to the at that point, but later on I did, to go to the law centre. I was just looking for our loved ones, basically.
Well, Mr. Choucair, I've come pretty much to the end of my questions. I just have one more for you, and that is whether, after looking through all the evidence in your statements and taking you back this morning through the experiences of that time, for which we're really grateful, is there anything you would like to add?
Where do you begin? There would be many things I would like to add, or hope for this inquiry to take into consideration. Atrocity is one of them, of the reasons why what happened. To maybe look into the issue of racism, that through evidence has the lack of urgency, because of people's ethnic background and culture, which I don't believe this inquiry has touched to a certain extent on that they should. I don't think I could sum up what everyone had to go through on that day, but it was the most painful experience in my life that until today won't go, no matter how much counselling or support I receive, myself or my family. And I'm sorry, but I'm overwhelmed by your question, that I can't really respond in the manner that I feel I should.
That's all right.
Right.
That's all right. Well, I'm going to ask the chairman now to take the usual break. I note that it's 1 o'clock. And Mr. Chairman, perhaps we should take the break for the lunch break and perhaps either come back at 2 o'clock and finish off or take the break now and take later lunch.
Mr. Choucair would like to complete his evidence this side of lunch. Is that not right?
I'm guided by you, sir.
Well, you've spent a long time in the witness box, and what would normally happen at this stage is we have a short break, 10 minutes or so, in order to give people who are following the proceedings from elsewhere a chance to suggest questions that perhaps we ought to put to you. And then we would then, if there are any questions, we would then ask you those questions and then you'd be free to go. So if we take that short break now, we would be coming back at 1:10, and at that point we would finish your evidence.
Sure.
And I think that would probably be in your interests as much as anyone's, wouldn't it?
I'm guided by you.
All right. Well, I think that would be the right thing to do, Mr. Bennett.
Yes, I think so.
So we'll have a short break now. We'll come back at 1:10, and we'll then see if there are any further questions that we ought to ask you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you go to the usher then, please? Mr. Millett, I think 10 minutes ought to be enough
Yes.
for this purpose. If for some reason it isn't, you can ask the usher to come and tell us why.
It certainly should. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 1:10, please. Would you ask Mr. Choucair to come back in, please? Okay. Right, Mr. Choucair. Well, we'll see if there are any more questions for you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Millett.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Choucair, there are no further questions for you that I have or anybody else has for you. So it only remains for me to thank you very much indeed for your evidence.
There is something I wish to say in regards to your last point, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Right.
First of all, I'd like to thank the inquiry for giving me the opportunity to, at my pace, to answer your questions and to elaborate on what happened on the night and the aftermath. So thank you, sir, and thank you, panel. The other thing I wish to say is that I hope that through your recommendations, you will make sure that this doesn't happen again. And I hope that your recommendations will be fulfilled and you will do something in your power to make sure that they are fulfilled. The second thing I wish to say is London has problems. London requires, in my opinion, a resilience centre. Somewhere where, in the event of a tragedy or disaster, one wouldn't have to go to numerous places, an all-in-one building, if you wish, where all these resources and help could be given. Combustible materials, well, need I say more about that? In my opinion, that's obvious what needs to be done there, the removal of combustible materials and the end to combustible materials. And lessons need to be learnt, whether they may be from recruitment, training. I mean, if you look at the 7/7 bombings, which I was there on the scene, having worked for Transport for London, that happened in numerous places. And we were more in control of that situation, despite the tragedy that happened, than what happened at Grenfell, which was in one place. So I hope that lessons will be learnt and you will make sure through your recommendations and through listening to the bereaved survivors and whoever else that this doesn't happen ever again. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank
Choucair.
you.
Thank you.
Mr. Choucair, before you leave, I'd like to thank you very much, not just on my own behalf, but on behalf of the panel as a whole, for your coming to give evidence. You've been very courageous, if I may say so, in describing what must have been a very distressing and painful time for you. And indeed, I think we can all appreciate how distressing and painful it's been for you to talk about it today. But we are really grateful to you for coming along to do that. And we've learned a lot from your evidence. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Would you like to go with the usher now, then, please? Thank you. Well, Mr. Willett, thank you very much. We'll break at that point. I think, although I know all those who are here and who support our work would normally expect to get a full hour for lunch, I think we're running slightly behind
We are.
ourselves today, aren't we? And I think we could afford to shorten the lunch break a little bit and come back at 2:05.
Very good. Thank you very much.
So, with apologies to everyone who's affected by that, I'll say we'll resume, please, today at 2:05.
Thank you, Mr.
Right?
Chairman.
Thank you very much.